regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Coral Gables Historic Preservation Board. We are residents of Coral Gables and are charged with the preservation and protection of historic or architecturally worthy buildings, structures, sites, neighborhoods, and artifacts, which impart a distinct historical heritage of the city. The board is comprised of 9 members, 7 of whom are appointed by the commission, 1 by the city manager, and the 9th is selected by the board and confirmed by the commission. 5 members of the board constitute a quorum, and 5 affirmative votes are necessary for the adoption of any motion. Any person who acts as a lobbyist pursuant to the City of Coral Gables Ordinance Number 2006-11 must register with the city clerk prior to engaging in lobbying activities or presentations before city staff, boards, committees, and/or the city commission. A copy of the ordinance is available in the office of the city clerk. Failure to register and provide proof of registration shall prohibit your ability to present to the Historic Preservation Board on applications under consideration this afternoon. A lobbyist is defined as an individual, corporation, partnership, or other legal entity employed or retained, whether paid or not, by a principal who seeks to encourage the approval, disapproval, adoption, repeal, passage, defeat, or modifications of any ordinance, resolution, action, or decision of any city commissioner, any action, decision, or recommendation of the city manager, any city board or committee, including but not limited to quasi-judicial, advisory board, trust, authority, or council, or any action, decision, or recommendation of city personnel during the time period of the entire decision-making process on the action, decision, or recommendation which foreseeably will be heard or reviewed by the city commission or a city board or committee, including but not limited to quasi-judicial, advisory board, trust, authority, or council. Presentations made to this board are subject to the city's false claims ordinance, chapter 39 of the City of Coral Gables City Code. I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Historic Preservation Board meeting of July 17, 2024 to order. The time is 4:02 p.m. Present today are, to my left, Mr. Silva, Ms. Rolando, Ms. Dene, Mr. Maxwell, and to my right, Ms. Spain and Mr. Baños. Please be advised that this board is, and myself, Cesar Garcia Pons. Please be advised that this board is a quasi-judicial board, and the items on the agenda are quasi-judicial in nature, which requires board members to disclose all ex parte communications. An ex parte communication is defined as any contact, communication, conversation, correspondence, memorandum, or other written or verbal communication that takes place outside a public hearing between a member of the public and a member of a quasi-judicial board regarding matters to be heard by the quasi-judicial board. If anyone has made any contact with a board member when the issue comes before the board, the member must state on the record the existence of the ex parte communication, the party who originated the communication, and whether the communication will affect the board member's ability to impartially consider the evidence to be presented regarding the matter. Ms. Perenas, is there any change to the agenda today?
Good afternoon. I do have a request from the property owners of 4722 Alhambra Circle, case file LHD 2024-007 and accelerated COA SP 2024-023 to be deferred to the August 21st meeting.
Okay, so deferred to the August, what's the date?
21st.
21st meeting. Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we'd like to swear in the audience. If any persons in the audience will be testifying today, please rise to be sworn in. Thank you. At the beginning of the meeting, does anybody have any ex parte communications they wish to disclose at this time? We'll do it again prior to the item. No? Okay. Since there are no minutes to be reviewed, we'll go to the first item. First item is case file COA SP 2024-019, an application for the issuance of a special certificate of appropriateness for the property at 44,210 Santa Maria Street, a contributing resource within the Santa Maria Street Historic District, legally described as lots 15 and 16, less southern 38 feet, block 93 Coral Gables Country Club Section Part 5, according to the plat thereof as recorded in Plat Book 23 at page 55 of the public records of Miami-Dade County, Florida. The application requests design approval for additions and alterations to the residence and site work. Ms. Counts.
So location map of the property on Santa Maria, right up towards Pinta Court. As a to refresh your memory, in 2007, the Santa Maria Street Historic District was designated, which includes all the houses that you see after construction. It's a contributing resource within the district, designed in 1953 by Martin Howry, who was a member of George Merrick's early design team. This is one of his later works. It has undergone some additions over the years, mostly to the rear. The historic integrity of the home is intact, and the symmetrical front facade has had no alterations. They are proposing alterations and additions to the residence and site work. I'll let the architect walk you through his presentation, but I did want to point out on the record 3 of the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation that we adhere to. They are national standards, and in this case, they are really relevant. So number 2 is the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alterations of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. Number 9 is new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated between the old and shall be compatible with the massing, scale, size, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and the environment. And number 10, new additions and adjacent related new construction shall be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. So I just wanted to put those top of mind for you. The architect will give his presentation. There are no variances requested with this application. The Board of Architects did review and approve on May 2nd of this year, and then we'll follow up at the end. Thank you
Ms.
very much.
Counts.
Loaded it? Forward, backward, and I think if you point at this, it makes a red mark there.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, board members, staff. Thank you. Nelson De Leon, Locus Architecture. I'll be presenting the project. With me today is one of the owners, Julia, and I think she might want to say a few words, and it's probably better if she says them before I start and sort of give you just kind of a background of what she feels about the house and the neighborhood and why we're here.
Great, thank you.
So, Julia, if you want to come up, you can say a few things.
Thank you so much for having us. My name is Julia Bishops Alcori. We've lived in the Gables for about 15 years when we first got to know the neighborhood, when both me and my husband trained at Nicholas Children. So we really fell in love with the area. We initially lived on University Drive, and I said, I would really like to live on this street because we were living there for rent, or Santa Maria. And my husband kind of laughed at me and said, okay, that's probably not possible because not many houses come for sale, but one did. We are really grateful that we were able to move into the former Swicks home that you're probably really familiar with, in a pretty mint condition. We've been living there for about 4 to 5 years now, and like as you live in a home, as you guys all know, you kind of get a feeling of like, what would work for you and what things to improve. So we noticed that 70% of the house, Nelson will describe to you, is kind of its most beautiful section in the back is occupied by the garage. So kind of the garage and my car have the best view of the golf course. So furthermore, our elderly parents live with us, so we really needed an area to the right side of the house. And we really bought it to be 1 story, so our intention would never be even to think about 2-story. And we know that's not possible, but we specifically bought it to be 1 story. In order to still be able to have a garage, which we all know is important, and Nelson will explain, we were thinking about moving one side forward, but that doesn't look very symmetrically and wouldn't keep with the front of the house, which is why we came up with that idea of have the other side, move forward too, to still kind of keep that front and keep the style of the home. So that's kind of like where we're at. We really love the place, and I think, having lived there really helps you to kind of, keep in really get to know it. It's not like we bought it and we said, oh, we really want to like just do this and this and this. No, it really took like almost now 5 years really to kind of get to the bottom of that. So both of us grew up in the old world, so we're really familiar with historic, and I think Coral Gables and the historic district really speaks to us. So we're grateful that you're keeping everything intact. So, and I'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Great, thank you so very much.
So, actually, before I start, I've been here a few times before many of you, and I've been fortunate to work on a number of historic properties in the Gables, and I've been fortunate to work on a number of the villages. So I've worked at French City, French Country, Italian, Pioneer Village Homes, and the Chinese Village, which I think I may be the only person to have designed a standalone structure there. So what I'm presenting today, basically I bring that up because I want you to know I didn't take on the project lightly. We went through many iterations. Can we make this work somehow with a garage in the back? We looked at it on the side. We looked at it. We were so constrained by the existing home and the site configuration that after a while we realized the only feasible way to expand the home, to bring that home up to today's standards, to enjoy the views of the golf course, and to maintain the structural integrity of the home was to bring that garage forward. And to do that, we tried to minimize that garage in its footprint and balance that out by expanding two wings, one on either side to keep the integrity of the home. So we have the original photo of the home, which you saw. We have original drawings of the home, which show that the home on the front and throughout most of the elevations pretty much were built the way this shows. The top view being the front elevation, the second one down, the garage. And as happens in quite a few of these homes built in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, the back of the home became almost secondary. Even with these homes that are on the golf course, many of them had these intrusions in the back that the home at the time could have been designed in a different way to have been able to appreciate that view. So this is the existing home. The top left and center are the front of the home. The top right is the rear of the home. This is really the crux of the design and why we're here. So roughly 70% of the rear of that home is blocked. It's either garage or it's solid wall. And the only part that actually has a visual connection is at the bottom left. That's a screened enclosure, very compressed, low ceiling height. The bottom center photo is the garage, which has utility equipment, air conditioning equipment, the electric meters, and then the bottom right is an image of the current laundry room. The neighborhood, you're all quite familiar with Santa Maria. Directly adjacent to this home is a combination of 60s, 70s, one-story homes, a couple of two-story homes, and then a very lovely Spanish home that Donna knows quite intimately. Really a beautiful example of those 1920 Spanish homes that were so well done.
Home for many, many years and have been in it. The previous owners were friends of ours.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with this.
So this image I've brought today because what I'm trying to establish is that what we're doing is really not an anomaly in the sense of bringing a garage that's forward-facing. So within a block of this home are 22 homes that have either a forward-facing garage or a forward-facing structure that's a garage. Some are side entry, some are forward-facing. Many are forward of the main entrance of the house. So this, what I'm trying to do is just establish that the context of the neighborhood has a number of homes in which this garage structure is forward-facing. It's unusual to have a project where so much revolves around the garage, but I think it's important to establish that what we're doing, again, is not out of the norm and context of what exists there. This is a survey of the home. In dark gray is the home itself, and then the light gray is the paving, the north side of which is completely paved front to back. Just so you know, we've taken the orientation and rotated it so that all the future drawings you see going from here are parallel to the street. So you'll be seeing all these drawings as if you're standing in the front of the street looking at the house itself. So among the things that we're trying to do is remove all this extra paving and instead replace that circular drive with a motor court. And then all that paving that runs along the side of the home becomes green area with a paved pathway. We have flanking proposed additions to the front, a bedroom study on the left, and a one-car garage on the right. And then to the rear, we're reimagining the whole back of the house with a 50-foot lap pool. Julia's a swimmer, and a little standalone gazebo. So it's, as Kara had pointed out, this project was reviewed by the Board of Architects. The board, all 7 members, unanimously approved it. The city architect also unanimously approved it. Their one suggestion, which I think was actually a very good suggestion, was to further reduce the 2 proposed wings and pull them away from the main central volume of the house. So the main central volume of the house is taller than the flanking wings. So we've pulled away so that that volume reads in its entirety and it maintains its original historic design. We're also proposing a site wall at the front. The wall itself with fence is 3'8", and then the piers are 4 feet. We took advantage of this and introduced a pedestrian entrance center line with the house. Currently, to enter the home, you come along the sides of the driveway and walk to the front door in a circular manner. I feel from a design and aesthetic point of view, whenever possible, if you could enter the home as a pedestrian centered with your own dedicated pathway, it's a much better solution. So a view of the current layout of the home, starting at the left, and part of the reason, again, why we're here, bathroom and closet, the small, with no view of the golf course, the small screen enclosure, a very deep recessed double door to the dining room, and then the garage element itself. I do have 3Ds, both aerials and from a lower perspective to show all of this again to you in 3Ds, but I'll walk you through the plan so that you can then relate this back to the 3Ds. So our proposed plan, starting on the bottom left, is the new wing, which is a bedroom study. The circular, well, the porte cochere now becomes a formal entry porch, maintains all its original architectural integrity. We do not touch any of that. And then to the left of that is the one-car garage. At the rear, the new master suite with double doors and side lights facing the golf course. And then we put large windows and another set of double doors facing into the new trellis area. We're removing the covered screen enclosure and replacing that with a trellis area. That allows us to raise the height of the doors and windows that are currently along the rear. It also allowed us to take that second room, which is a Florida room, and create a central access with the formal living room, flank that with double doors. So now that whole room has a view to the golf course and the new pool deck. We introduced a little connector piece between what was the garage and what was the Florida room. That's all glazed. And now the garage becomes the Florida room, fully glazed views toward the pool, the golf course, and then flanking that, double doors and side lights looking back toward into the trellis and into the new side garden that we've created. And finally, what was the laundry room now becomes a guest bedroom with double doors and side lights, also looking onto the garden, out to the gazebo, and then out to the golf course. This is an enlarged view of the new rear of the house with the lap pool and the gazebo. The standalone gazebo is actually the only roofed exterior area in the home aside from the entry porch. We decided not to ask for a variance, so everything is per the zoning code. So we sacrificed adding additional covered porches to either the master side or the family room so that we could have a presentation, a plan that was free of variances. The current roof plan, the darker areas are roof areas that we're either eliminating or reconfiguring. The new roof plan showing those two wings. So the two forward-facing wings are pushed away from the central volume, and they're also stepped in from that main spine of the home, the original home that goes end to end. So it breaks in of the original structure on both sides. And the same thing happens at the rear end. The new master suite is set in from the original structure. And then the garage portion, actually I'll get to the garage portion on the slide after this. So this shows us the existing main front elevation, top drawing. The bottom drawing is the new reimagined flanking wings, and the central portion being independent and proud of those two wings. The rear view. So here we see along the bottom how the entire rear portion of the home now is completely opened, both horizontally, and we took advantage of this and added additional height to the doors. We had enough depth in the tie beam to notch out of those tie beams and pick up additional height. So the existing doors along the rear are 6'7", which really compresses the view. We were now able to get them up to 7'8", and that, as architects, builders, makes a huge difference to your sight lines and the way you can experience nature. In this case, with a golf course, it makes a very dramatic impact. The side elevation on the garage side, which faces north, that now gets replaced with the family room with the double doors and side lights leading out to the new side garden. And then at the left end of the picture of the elevation is the new garage wing. We've added large windows to the garage along with what we propose to be carriage-style doors to the front, so that when you view the garage, it is really rather light-filled. It picks up the same module of glazing as the proposed bedroom study. So the bedroom study is on the bottom right. Those double windows that you see flanking that side repeat on the opposite side, the front being the full height glass, which we'll see on the renderings. To the bottom left is the new master suite with the large windows in the master suite and in the bathroom itself. I'll skip through the landscape and go to the 3Ds. So with the 3Ds, I purposely eliminated all of the landscaping in the front. The sides, I took out all the trees, all the palms that we were going to propose, all the flowering plants, because I want you to see clearly what the architecture is. That's not what's going to happen when it gets built, because there'll be hedges, there'll be flowering plants, there'll be small trees. But this gives you architecturally what we're proposing. So this is the existing main house, and this is the proposed forward-facing flanking wings. The one on the left side is that bedroom study with the full height windows, 4 panels that match the width of the new garage doors. You can see what was a porte cochere now becomes a porch, and then the garage wing itself with a very large windows on the side. Those reproduce directly across on the bedroom study side, and they then reproduce again on the outside portions of both elements. So this is the view from the main entry drive, with the drive going all the way to the rear of the property. And then the proposed new, which becomes a motor court. The driveway at the back gets eliminated, becomes a garden pathway. And then the garage doors, which are not represented here, just did not print right, but those are carriage-style doors. The rear of the home as it exists, and the proposed new with the lap pool, the standalone gazebo, the trellis element, and then all of the new glazing. from the southwest view. All of these new roofs are all at or less than the secondary roof. So the primary main central volume of the home maintains the highest pitched roof of the entire house. All other roofs were set so they would not exceed the height of the existing secondary roofs. And a view from the sidewalk looking back toward the house with the new entry gate, the new pedestrian entrance, and then the two flanking wings. So that is the presentation. If there's any image you'd like for me to come back to discuss further or look at, let me know.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon. Does anybody have any questions for staff or the architect? Mr.
do.
Baños.
On the side where they currently have the driveway going through, what's the distance between the property line and the home?
So the ends of the home are basically at the setback line, so roughly 10 feet. The total setbacks required are 20 feet. Yeah, so roughly 10, 11 feet.
I'm asking, what's the distance without the setbacks? In other words, what do you have between the home and the next door property?
Yeah, 10 and a half to 11 feet. Yeah.
There's no, I mean, even if you were to ask for a variance, what would be the problem with having a carport on the side as opposed to a garage? In other words, to have the vehicle enter that side as opposed to having, my issue is, I don't have an issue with the back, it looks beautiful. Front, I think it changes completely the view of the house. So is it possible, and maybe staff can elaborate, but is it possible to have a carport on the side and ask for a variance for it to be able to be had in that way as opposed to having the garage in the front?
I'm not sure how staff would feel. Zoning, I'm sure, would have a big issue. So the carport minimum width requirement clears 10 feet. And by the time we add the structure on the edge, we'd have a structural pillar or column or something sitting on the property line, and I'm not sure if the neighbor would want that.
I wanted to know how much distance it was.
We looked at quite a few options. We looked at how to do a standalone garage at the back. We looked at, could we do a garage that just started at the rear of the property? But in all cases, we couldn't just start at the rear of the property because how tight we were to the neighbor. So it always led back to having to go all the way to the back of the property and then turn somehow into the property, which brought us right back to the garage where we have now. And the code does have an exception for a single story, 350 square foot max standalone garage that can be 5 feet from the rear and 5 feet from the side. In this case, there's a very large tree in the back, which would prohibit us from reaching the 5 and 5. So that element would have to come forward. And then what happens is it's a 75-foot one-way drive in and 75 feet in reverse out. So
your driving skills have to be
we
quite
looked
improved.
we looked at quite a few options, and it was there was just no easy way to make this happen in the back of the property the way the home is currently configured.
Mrs. Couch, there was a question about a variance.
Yeah, so this board does have latitude to give variances from the zoning code, and we have done that in the past for widths of carports, locations of garage, setbacks, things like that. So this board does have the latitude within the code to do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Baños, any further questions? Anybody else? Yes, Ms. Dene.
I have a question. I was looking at the massing study. I like the way you put the pictures, which I think shows clearly the distinction between the old building and the current one. How do you address staff's concerns, and actually my concerns also, that this contradicts the Secretary of Interior standards number 9 and 10?
Yeah, there's really no way to address that because there's standards and then there's trying to make those standards work within the reality of a home and a lifestyle and a modern enjoyment of the property. So some elements that are in our ordinance today would have prevented Coral Gables from looking like what it does in the 20s. All of these beautiful homes built in the 20s, so many of them you could not build today, either because of height, because of setback, because they had the carport on the setback, because the garage was here or there. So what happens with these ordinances as they develop, expand, sometimes they facilitate how you can deal with the structure, sometimes they complicate how you can deal with the structure. So if you look at it coldly from the Secretary of the Interior's, yes, what Kara is saying is correct. The Secretary of Interior does not want, for the most part, the front of any historic structure to be changed. I think we have a very unique condition here in which the home, while very charming, I believe if that home existed exactly as we've proposed today there's not a single person that would drive by and say, oh my God, who built this, right? It would fit perfectly within the neighborhood. That's the conundrum we have, is that we have a home that's contributing, that was designed a certain way, that prohibits the use of the backyard, the views to the golf course, which no one would ever have designed that way. So yes, it's an incredibly difficult project. And I understand that historic can't, because their hands are tied with the regulations. Your hands are not tied, so you can look at it from a whole different point of view. And that's really why we're here. Does what we're proposing destroy the integrity of the house, or does it change it? Absolutely, it changes it. But does it change it in a negative way? I don't think so. I think the way the home was designed and what we're proposing are very compatible. We're keeping the central volume of the home still exactly as it was designed. We're flanking it with elements that are both, I would say, sort of taking a nod to the original by maintaining the roof slopes, the roof volumes, and being really a very small footprint. At the end of the day, it's a one-car garage and balanced by the sort of guest study wing. And that, I feel, maintains that historical intent of the symmetry of the home, how it was laid out. So that's what we tried to follow. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how I viewed it.
Thank you, Mr. Leon.
I have a question.
Ms. Spain.
So Carrie, does anything in the back bother you?
I understand. And this question came up with another one of Nelson's projects of changing the rear pretty substantially. This is a very unique district in that every property is located on a golf course, and we're cognizant of that. We understand that. So the changes to the back are a bit much, but generally, yes.
I can tell you, when you walk into that house, you don't realize there's a golf course.
Yes, and I've been inside the house
There's
too.
another home that I believe was altered, that Mike Steffens lived in for a while, that also was a courtyard
That's the one
home.
That's the one he brought to you guys just recently.
Yeah, right?
I hope I'm not troubled.
45.
I'm not, and that's, again, a home that is on a
Yes.
golf course. And
4501.
Exactly.
That's going to be a lovely home when it's done. Yes.
But that, again, was built, and you couldn't see the golf course.
No,
Beautiful party house.
couldn't even
except-
enjoy it. Yeah, no doors whatsoever to the back.
Yeah, and the house actually next door to mine, you couldn't see the golf course. So I really appreciate opening it up. I actually don't mind the garage. I probably should. but you know, it makes no sense to have the garage blocking the view. There are so many homes on that street where there's something blocking the view. Fortunately, my home was open even in the 1920s to the golf course. I do have a little bit of a problem with a window on the opposite end. It seems very large. It doesn't really, seems like it goes necessarily with the original home. I don't know. I get what
We
you're
could
saying
certainly
about it.
change that.
And Mr. Leon,
Just in a bedroom, so I don't think it's necessarily, it has to be quite that large.
Mr. Baños.
you said that there's a possibility of putting the garage all the way in the back, even if you have to improve your driving skills to get in and out. You said that it would be an issue of moving a tree around, but how would that detrimentally affect? Look, my perspective, beautiful job in the back, and I understand the homeowner's impetus of trying to enjoy the full property. It's very, very pretty to have. I think it fundamentally changes the look in the front of the house, besides the fact that it doesn't comply with the guidelines. To have those two additions, those two lines come in the front. I mean, you're changing completely the structure of the property, you're changing the way it looks, you're changing the perspective. So is there a way that that garage can end up on the side as a way of without damaging the tree, maybe moving the tree, I don't know if that's a possibility, without having to change the front of the house?
So, Mr. Jones, it's a separate question because of the tree. If not, it would be the same answer. But I think the question is now, if the tree is not an issue, would you be able to address the garage differently?
If the tree wasn't there, you could put that element there. The garage would be unconnected to the house, so it'd be a standalone element. We would, I think, then have to get rid of the standalone gazebo because that's in the area where the garage would have to be placed.
And it still would be one way in and one way.
One way, right, exactly. There'd be no turnaround space available within.
Can I
One more question from Ms. Spain.
I'm sorry, I have another question. I wasn't in the department when the district was done. I believe I was in the manager's office at the time. I'm fairly certain.
2007, yeah.
Anyhow, my question is, but this was included because of Charlie's Wick, right?
It was included because of the time period of the district, 1953. The time period of the district extends to 1958. It's noted for his association with him, but it's not because of it.
So it was the architecture also?
It's Martin Howery. I mean, it's a very late work by a very prominent architect.
Ms. Couts.
I did. I wanted to respond to something. So the Secretary of the Interior standards are not, they're adopted into our zoning code, into our preservation ordinance. They're national standards that we are obligated to uphold. And by default, this board, as a body that operates underneath our preservation code, is also obligated to uphold. So it's not just something in the zoning code that, yeah, you can don't have to look at as much. Board of Architects don't have to at all. They don't have to address the standards in any way. You all do.
Thank you, Ms. Couts. I was going to bring that up myself. Mr. Durana.
I've got a question.
Let the record show Mr. Durana is present, 4:05 p.m.
Was the garage an addition at some point, or was that part of the original?
It was original.
That was part of the original. And have we ever granted a variance or anything for a historic home where we say it doesn't need a garage? I know Coral Gables requires it, but is there something that says he has to put a garage in the front? Or he has, we have to keep a garage? Okay, can we grant some variance or something? Because is that,
I don't know if we certainly don't encourage it because it's a requirement in the code. Everyone has to have one covered parking space. I cannot recall one that we've waived the off-street parking requirement.
I don't think.
Into the record, guys.
I'm sorry, I don't
I can't think
remember
of one either.
doing that when I
I know
was in
that some of the bigger developments have reduced the number of required parking that are historic, but
It's De Leon, your name, right? De Leon is could they, instead of the garage all the way in the back, the one that they don't want to drive in and out, okay, instead of that being could it be a carport, or does it have to be in other words, it would be a carport that would not be attached to the property? It would be something that's a freestanding carport. Could they do that or not?
needs to be a covered parking space with a roofed structure.
So it could be, because you could call it a carport, not necessarily use it as a carport, but
Yeah, and I think part of,
Before we go too far, would that be something that the client would be interested in doing? I don't want to talk if
I
it's
think they
not.
have, part of the reason for the garage is they have stuff. They wanna put-
So I think we appreciate the conversation, but
look,
I don't believe that's a direction the
I know, I'm
applicant's
just
gonna go.
trying to,
Yeah. I appreciate that.
but, all right.
Great. Any additional questions? We're going to have discussion later, but not questions for staff or the applicant.
Did you want me to finish with our portion or no?
one other question for me is, And then I think you had mentioned, somebody mentioned something about not going up to a second floor. Is that, we wouldn't want that, like from the historic side? I mean,
It's a one-story property. We have allowed second-story additions on historic properties, depending on how they're done, where they're done, usually back in the rear.
Yeah.
It's been done before, yes.
and that's not something they want to explore, or?
I don't think so, but in this particular home, I think it'd be,
I agree. I think, I like
it'd be-
the layout.
it'd be
on the-
difficult,
I like
yes.
it more as a one-story, but I'm just trying to think of anything.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Was the city done, or did you have additional?
Just wanted to reiterate our stance, and this is not something that I have undertaken lightly because I very much admire Mr. De Leon, and normally they're the easiest staff reports that I write because they're all okay. But in staff's opinion, the front elevation is sacrosanct. I mean, it's the reason it projects to the district. If these additions had been made prior to the district being designated, it probably would not be a contributing residence because we look at alterations to properties. So in my opinion, this would jeopardize its standing as a contributing residence.
Thank you, Ms. Couch. Mr. De Leon, any last?
no, I just hope you all can see the case I've tried to make.
We appreciate
and
it.
understand, both sides. So
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Okay,
Could I stand here or I could just?
Mr. Orlando?
I have to say, I'm really struggling.
Do you want to make a question, or you want to keep it for board discussion?
So keep it for board
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much.
I need to disclose something.
Okay,
I just need to disclose that I now live in a home designed by Nelson De Leon. Somehow I need to put that on the record.
Madam City Attorney, that's not an issue, is it?
Ms. Spain, if you have no ongoing relationship, I think that would suffice.
I'm very happy with it, but it doesn't affect my,
So my question was going to be, since Ms. Payne has been in the house many times, we've been asked to disclose things like that, and she already has, should she state that she has no problem?
Yeah, for the if you did not visit the property for purposes of this hearing today, but just have been familiar with it in the past, that shouldn't be a problem, and you've also disclosed it on the record, so I don't see an issue with that. But as always, please don't visit particular sites in advance of these hearings. If you have a familiarity with it and you want to disclose it, that's plenty fine.
Great, thank you very much. So we're going to close, we're going to open it to public hearing. Does anybody in the audience wish to speak in favor of this case? Does anybody wish to speak in opposition of this case? Okay, hearing none, public comment is closed. It is now back for discussion. Ms. Rolando.
I'm really struggling because I don't, in a vacuum, I don't object to the design, except I do agree with Donna that the windows on the left addition seem like they overwhelm it. The concern I have is it just doesn't seem, it's to me clunky, the additions. I'd be much more comfortable with the two-story addition overlooking the rear. I want to hear what everyone has to say because I don't love it. And I usually love Nelson stuff. It's usually one of the easier projects that come before us, so it's a struggle. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rolando. Any great way to start the discussion. Anybody want to join in?
I wanted to hear from some of the architects what their perspectives are. I mean, other than Ms. Spain, I want to make sure what your perspective is. As again, my issue with it is it does. Besides the fact that Kara made it very plain that the guidelines are not optional. Okay, and if the guidelines are not optional, then we really don't have any leeway. Okay, with regards to accepting that. In other words, if we're going to have a preservation and we're going to preserve, let's preserve, right? And those guidelines are there for that reason, okay? However unique the property may be, however problematic it may be for the overall use of the property, it is what it is. But I would like to see, at least for the opinion of the architects on the board as to what their perspective is, other than, I mean, I agree that the window, it's a little large. I don't like the two wings in the front. I think it takes away completely from the look of the house, the intention of the house, what the house is supposed to be. I have no objection to them opening the back of it for the purpose of they're doing it. And I was just trying to figure out a way in which they could have their garage in some way, so that, you know, we meet the requirement of the code, and they can at least can provide for the storage that they need.
Thank you, Mr. Banos. Mr. Silva?
Sure. So I too am struggling with this one. From an architectural standpoint, I completely understand how you're hamstrung by the site, right? We have this garage in the rear, blocking the view, blocking the lifestyle, blocking the renovations we want to do, right? So I understand all the moves you're doing in the back. They make complete sense. So putting those two additions in the front, I think that the way they're designed is, I think it's elegant. I don't have such a problem. I don't think it's clunky. I think that the moves you're doing by pulling them away and kind of making them lower, I get all that stuff. Where I get stuck is that I do think that really changes the massing of the front facade. And I don't think any of us here are debating that, right? I think it's obviously a change to the front facade and to the house, because it was designed as this central mass with these two horizontal wings. So that's kind of where I'm stuck, right? I understand that looking at putting the garage in the back, I don't think is feasible because of all the reasons you mentioned, right? Putting it, there's a large tree there, having someone do that maneuver and then come out on a 10-foot wide driveway from the rear of the property all the way back in reverse. And it's very difficult. So it's a difficult decision because if you want to do these additions, that's really the only place to put them, right in the front. That being said, when I first looked at this, I said, well, why do we need a garage at all? I was kind of thinking along Mr. Durana's idea of saying, well, do they need a garage? Because that's really triggering this whole problem, right, the garage. Maybe they don't need a garage. Maybe the porte cochere can be called a carport, and we provide a variance for the size of that and let it be. If that's something the client doesn't want or they need a garage, then that's a different story. But I think I have an issue approving something that so drastically changes that front facade on Santa Maria. Right, I think moves, as I said before, what you're doing on the back, I think makes sense, and I think it's within what we normally approve and is acceptable, I think, following the Secretary standards. But I keep getting stuck on those two front additions. Although I think they're very well done, and I'll, kind of in a vacuum, looking at this as an addition on another house, I would agree with the Board of Architects, right? I think it's well done. I think it's in proportion. I think it's elegant. But on a historic property, it's not so cut and dry for me.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Well, then I have two comments. One is the item number 9 of the secretary. I'm going to read it because I think Mr. Delano has made a case, and I think it's interesting that we're all sort of looking at this as new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property, period. That's the first sentence. The second one is the new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. So I think it's an important item, and I think the architect has done an incredibly good job with the design, the presentation of the design, the discussion of the design. I think it may meet the criteria, and I could understand why we're all sort of debating this. So that's the first comment. The second one is related to the first comment, which has to do with the way that we vote. That every item, every case here is case by case. It is this house and only this house that we're talking about. We're not talking about the district. We're not talking about Coral Gables. We're not talking about setting precedents. We're talking about this particular property and this case only. I know that sometimes we get caught up in some sort of greater ideas, but our job on this one is specifically for this particular item. And having said both those two things, I completely share everyone's thoughts on this one's a tough one. So I think it would be interesting to see how this vote folds out.
So
Mr.
if I were to
Baños.
make a motion, to be getting instructions from the chair, or perhaps from the city attorneys, if I were to make a motion in which I would like to sort of accept the recommendations or the modifications to the back, but essentially say that the front elevation modifications should not be allowed, how would I phrase it in a way that's consistent with my thoughts at least?
So first, I would want to make sure that the applicant is in agreement with that. To approve something that they don't agree with going forward makes things difficult for them, appealing wise, et cetera.
Or deny it altogether would be the other choice,
Deny
right?
altogether, so it would be, as drafted in the staff report, a motion to deny the proposed residence and site with the alterations to the residence and site work as part of the COA application. So that would be the motion to deny the application. If you want to have some discussion about, it's a little bit difficult to have a sort of halfway approval of these. And this way, the way this appears to be designed, I don't know that you could approve rear additions, but not others.
So let's make it simple. I'll move to.
Wait, before you do, I do want two things, is I also agree with Ms. Spain about the design of the front piece on the left-hand side that, and I'm sure Mr. Alonso said that he'd be happy to work on the design of that front window piece. So if there is going to be a motion that has to do with the front, I would encourage that. Or maybe there's going to be a friendly amendment from Ms. Spain. But even before we do that, I have a question for the city attorney.
Of course.
I know that we need 5 affirmative votes to pass. We're 8. If we're 4-4, what happens?
If it's 4-4, it gets deferred automatically to the next meeting for consideration of the full board.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Baños.
So what I would like to do is make a motion to deny consistent with the words that Jennifer utilized and consistent with the recommendations of staff.
Is that enough, or should we read some of those out?
Can I incorporate in
So
my?
I understand that to be a motion to deny the design proposal as well as the issuance of the certificate of appropriateness
Yes, it is.
for the property located at 4210 Santa Maria Street.
Are the conditions clear?
It's a full denial of the application.
I'm sorry, are the reasons clear?
The reasons clear as a stating in staff report that is consistent with the standards that are required. In other words, for the reasons outlined in the staff report. So I incorporated by reference.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion to deny by Mr. Baños. Is there a second?
Yes, I will second that motion.
And there's a second by Ms. Dene. Any further discussion?
I mean, before I vote, I kind of
Mr.
had
Durana.
a couple of questions. I guess one is for the city attorney and one is kind of for staff. I guess the first being just legally, like, what is a resident allowed to do? Like, if they, they purchase this home, they want to add to this house. I mean, by right, they have to be allowed to add to the house, correct?
So our process is if you are a designated home or a contributing structure, you go through this process, which is the certificate of appropriateness process. So of course, there is some level of property rights, as there always is in all items, but this process is one that the city believes is a proper process and legal process for contributing structures or designated homes to go through this process. There are appellate rights if it's denied here. So the city is fine with this process, but that's what you do when you're a contributing structure. If you want to make alterations to your home, additions, you get your certificate of appropriateness.
And then my question for staff is, it seems like the only other option here would be a second story. And I don't know if that's, I mean, is that something you guys would prefer? I just.
Actually, I don't think that's, we have a motion, that's already been discussed. And we do have a motion.
Because I mean, I like the design. I think it's, nice project. I think it's I think Nelson's the right guy for this job. If we're going to pick someone, I think he knows, the area. He's done a bunch of houses there and he's got a lot of experience. But I also understand, the staff's concern with bringing, the facade forward. It's just tough.
Mr. Chair, If I may, denial of this particular certificate of appropriateness in no way prohibits the property owner from coming back with a different design or working with staff to come with a different certificate of
They can
appropriateness.
modify the whole thing. They could just make it different.
And
You have to have the garage, and the
gentlemen,
problem is
gentlemen, it's now, you have a vote. It is the opportunity here, is you can vote what you feel is right. So we have a motion and a second. Let's call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Silva,
Yes.
Ms. Rolando,
Yes.
Ms. Spain,
No.
okay, Mr. Manos,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Ms. Dene,
Yes?
Mr. Rana,
no.
Mr. Garcia Pons.
No. Motion to deny passes 5-3.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, next item is a,
Mr. Chair,
yes, ma'am.
can we discuss briefly the omission, the purpose, or as staff about omitting the garage?
So there, we have.
Actually, we have a vote, so do we, I don't think we should continue discussion unless we reopen it.
Yeah, Ms. Rolanda, at this point, if there's something that will come back to you, it would come back to you, and it's better not to discuss it at this moment. We can discuss it if and when another certificate of appropriateness comes before you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a board city commission item. We have a presentation from city staff regarding the gondola building.
Hello, good afternoon. Anna Pernas, Historic Resources Director. We do have, there we go, presentation. So just a brief little update, 'cause I think some are familiar with this project, some aren't. So I believe in March, we did have an agenda item that I did present before the members of this board and had stated that at that time, we had gotten comments from the Historic Resources Office from the state about the cultural grants that were applied to the reconstruction of the gondola building. And at that time, the state had requested that the building either be reconstructed in its original location or that locations along the canal were considered. And they had actually identified, I think, 3 or 4 spots within an email that they sent to staff along the waterway. Just kind of give a brief little introduction to the building, and then I'm going to let Director of Public Works, Hermes Diaz, talk about the conditions of the sites and then the 2 locations that are being considered for relocation. Today is a discussion because I need to understand where this board is, what direction will come from the board, and kind of have that open discussion with you all while still figuring out where to, or if we need to relocate. So just a little history on the gondola building. So this is an original accessory structure of the Biltmore complex, built in 1925. The gondola building is located within the Biltmore's golf course and adjacent to the original hole number 3. And the location was strategically located so that you could launch as a launch area and service for the facilities of 15 to 25 gondolas that were imported from Italy along with their gondoliers. The waterway canals and the gondola concept was well within George Merrick's City Beautiful vision. The hotel itself and the country club complex was designated as a National Historic Landmark by the National Park Service in 1996, and the gondola building was considered one of the contributing features of the site. In 2019, the building had been in disrepair, and a grant for rehabilitation of the gondola building was applied for. The city since then has been working with the Historic Resources Office of the state of Florida to reconstruct the gondola building, given funds for that reconstruction, and looking at locations of that. A presentation, I think, was made to you all before by previous preservation officer of different locations, because there is a section of our code that does allow for moving existing structures, but This is the current photo of it, just in case there's no confusion here.
No, Karen, prior to
Yeah,
its
and this was
collapse.
prior to the most recent condition of the building where there's been a partial collapse of the structure and reconstruction is required. I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Diaz, and here to answer any questions you guys have.
Thank you. Good evening, Hermes Diaz. I'm the Public Works Director. As Anna mentioned, we're here today hopefully getting your blessing for the relocation of the new building. I'll just go through some of the current things that we're working on the plans. That's the original location of the gondola building within the larger golf course. Some historical views. We are looking at two potential locations, which are labeled location 1 and number 2. This is a blow-up or the area. I think option 1 is probably the one that we're the most partial for. The reason for us asking for the relocation is that the existing location is actually very problematic. It's very problematic due to the potential for some access issues. There's a safety of the workers that are going to be subjected to potential golf course during construction. The disruption to the golfing operation at that location, it's rather significant, and there are also significant concerns about damaging the golf course through having construction equipment on a regular basis driving in and out to that location. In addition to all the disruptions to the golf course, the operations, the location that we're proposing, we believe that it has safer access. It will be less disruptive. I realize that I misspelled the word there, but less disruptive to the operation of the golf course. Some of the electrical services, which will have to be redone, are a lot closer, easily accessible. It is located in the canal, which we believe will be acceptable to the Division of Historical Resources. Obviously, the con is that it won't be at its original location. And if I could, I'm sorry, I lost it. If I could have it back. I'm gonna go and put back there you go. I did it wrong again. I'm sorry. These are the two options that we're looking for, and with option 1 probably being the one that we're the most partial to. Would like to hear your thoughts about it.
Where is that in the relation to
can you go to the-
can you
We
zoom
go
out?
back to the larger view.
I think that's right off
Okay,
Bird Road.
so to the
Yeah,
bottom right
closer to
corner.
Bird Road
Can you
and the
zoom-
park.
Guys, one at a time, please. Mr. Durana.
Can we zoom into that right? Okay.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, there's like a facility there already.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, should I let them finish their presentation? or
We're
can
done.
we-
He's done.
Okay.
That's it.
I mean, I've played the course a lot, and where that building is, I mean, that building gets pelted with golf balls all the time. It is a really bad spot, especially if you want to use the building for anything. I mean, if you're just going to leave it as a monument, then fine. But I think if you're going to use it for any sort of maintenance or anything like that, I think moving it would make sense. You get full use of it, but as far as the locations, I mean, I'm up for.
And that is definitely one of the issues, but also during constructions, you're going to have some of the workers going to be exposed to that. And also, as you can tell, it's very deep into the golf course. So having construction equipment, trucks getting in there, you're looking at a potential for recurring damage to the golf course.
I mean, I get that part, but that's also on the Biltmore for letting it rot away, like they have a duty to maintain it.
Totally my issue.
So, I mean, for me, at that part, I'm not going to consider that. It's just.
I cannot fix the scenes of the past.
I get
can
it,
only.
except I don't believe we should reward bad behavior. I don't understand why it can't stay in the location where it is. I'm sorry.
Wait,
It's
actually,
like, I'm having this conversation like I still work with him.
if I can ask a question again of staff, is what's being requested of the board today, Ms. Perenas?
We're not asking for a certificate of appropriateness, but you're asking for hopefully your blessing for us to proceed with the design at the new location. Direction.
The relocation.
So
the
there's no vote here. This is a recommendation to you personally as the Director of Public Works.
Well, I presume I would like to take a vote and tell me, right?
I think they are looking for some direction from the board about preferences, but to the extent something is going to come back to you that would require an official vote, that's not today.
But it will definitely be coming back to you with a more developed design and with more information for you to eventually get a certificate of appropriateness.
And
But that's
before-
not what we're here today.
Before, it means any recommendation from this board, whether it's option 1, option 2, or option 72.
I mean, you're welcome to make any recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Mr. Maxwell?
Will the building be moved or reconstructed, meaning using the existing parts? Or will it be replicated, meaning you're going to demolish what's there and then build something totally new?
The idea is to reuse whichever parts can be redone at the new location. I will leave those details up to the designer, and that's part of what we're going to bring to you later on with a more developed set of drawings. The idea is to save as much as possible. I couldn't tell right now whether it's 2%, 5%, 10%.
Mr. Silva?
So I'm not familiar with this item. I wasn't on the board last time it was brought to us. But if you don't mind putting the overall plan back up, the overall site plan that shows, yeah. So you're telling us that there are two important factors in considering the movement, right? The availability of utilities and site access for construction, I guess. Where are the utilities? I mean, the utilities exist where they are now.
There
right?
is some
So that's-
electrical, there's some electric, the only utility there right now is electrical, and that will still remain. There'll likely have to be some restoration to that service that will have to happen for that to remain at this location. Our biggest concern is the access during construction, the staging, the workers that are going to be exposed to being here with golf course during construction. I don't think that necessarily shutting down the golf course during construction is really an option. And the potential, if you look at the distance, how are they going to get there? You're looking at heavy equipment going to be traveling on those little paths that were created mostly for golf carts. And there is the potential of recurring damage to the golf course during construction. And we just feel that the impact to the golf course itself and just the constructability of that location is very difficult. There's no way to access that from the north, so everything will have to come from the south. And we just believe that it's just difficult to access, more expensive, and I don't want to discard it. I want to say it once again, you know, you're going to have people working out there potentially being exposed to golf course being hit all around them.
So, I mean, I think that the golf ball concern, I think that can be handled, right? There's netting systems, there's things that can be done during the construction. I'm not super concerned about that. So the utilities exist in the original location. They exist, and there's no plans to bring water or upgrades or anything. It's not going to be
Just
turned into a
electrical,
bathroom. It's just so
but the
even in the new
electrical-
location, there's no plans. It would just be fed electric.
Just electrical. That's the only utility that at this point is being planned to restore.
And then the other part of my question was site access, right? So what is if you're going to rebuild it in the original location, and if you're going to do it in location number 1 or 2, where is your construction access from in either case?
Well, to be frank, the location access from the original location, I mean, it's we'll have to figure that out. I mean, it will have to come probably from somewhere on the road, and
Because I think the only access is from the little, like, to me, it looks like it's the same distance, is why I'm asking, right?
Mr.
talk to you
Baños,
about
please.
that. I just want,
Mr. Baños,
I can answer
please.
the question to him. I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, but my question, like, because I think you cannot have access from the sort of Granada side because that bridge is there in the way. So you'd have to come in through, I think you'd have to come in through Bird, where the course touches Bird.
there actually is
Which
an
is-
access road on. If you figure out how to use the. Here we go. It's an access road somewhere through there.
Yeah.
Right there.
So there is, okay, so it is much shorter to build it in the other location.
The options of access to that location, they're really not great, but most likely the entrance will have to still go through that area. We just have to travel all the way through just to get there somehow. There's a right-of-way entrance here, is heavy landscaping. That would be another option. Potentially, we have to cut through and remove some of the landscaping that was installed there a couple of years ago, maybe on the call. So that would be just another potential would be really the only locations that I can imagine at this point. But the exits on the east side on Bird, that's where the operation and the maintenance for the golf course, that's where they have their own access to. So it will definitely be a lot less disruptive to the operation and obviously any potential damage.
And just one last point of discussion,
Please.
since we're talking about this building that's really a jewel, kind of, it's really kind of a folly almost, right? It's just a building that you just kind of walk around and look at, right? So if we're talking about relocating, I would think it would be a good idea, if it does end up relocating to position number 1 or number 2 or whatever, maybe it would be a good idea to have the Parks Department or your department take a look at making that somehow publicly accessible. If you're pushing it to that corner already, it's going to be more viewable from that bridge, which some pedestrians use, not a lot, but some. And maybe there is some sort of access. Not a requirement, but just if we are going to move it, maybe we think about that at least.
Thank you. Ms.
And I was just going to say that just across the waterway from that location is 80 Barnes Park. So there is a public park just across on the other side of the waterway. So there may be some sort of connection there.
I have one question for staff, then it's Ms. Dene, then Mr. Maxwell. Ms. Peranas, can you remind the board the original use of that gondola building?
It was a storage facility for gondolas.
So storage facility. Okay, thank you. Ms. Dene.
Thank you. Some of my questions have been already asked and answered. Thank you. What is your envisioned use of this building? Would it be open to the public? Is it going to be another storage facility?
We haven't figured that out yet. And that was always the hard part about that facility. That's really, the original thought about putting it at the Kerrdijk Center, when that was originally thought, that will be a location that will definitely have use through the Parks Department. But when the state's historical folks said that wasn't really an option, that's we canceled the meeting here with the follow-up meeting that we're going to have with this board. That's something where we'll have to come back to you when we come for the certificate of occupancy. That's always been the hard thing about this building. What are we going to do with it? It's in the middle of nowhere. It cannot really be used for what it was intended to originally. I couldn't really tell you at this moment, to be frank with you.
Thank you.
Mr. Maxwell, and then Ms. Spain.
Okay.
This is a toughie. I mean, why are we spending nearly $1 million to replicate a building that has no use and won't serve anybody that we know of at this point? I guess that's a real question. I know that's a political decision, but I mean, it's a question for the board here as well. I don't know what hole it's on. I don't play the golf course because I don't play golf anymore. But it's not going to serve golfers. It's not going to serve gondolas. And we don't know that it's going to serve anybody.
I can't answer the question.
That
That was
wasn't
a
a-
decision that
grant,
wasn't
yeah.
made by
That
my
wasn't a
staff.
question.
The grant was applied to, the commission
By our
decided to
office.
That
fund
wasn't
it.
a
It's in
question,
the
Mr.
budget.
Diaz.
Mr. Chair, whenever you can.
Ms. Spain.
Just a couple of observations. I believe Commissioner Kerrdijk first brought up this building when he was commissioner in the 1990s, I believe. And he asked Public Works to look into restoring it then. And ever since then, it's just sat there. And every year we go over and you have your Public Works little list, what you're going to restore on historic, and that's at the bottom of it. And so now it's fallen down, and there was a point when I was in zoning that I talked to the Biltmore about bringing back the gondola rides and having it go from that building down, and I almost had the city attorney on board. There was a liability issue that was a problem with the golf balls, and I was thinking maybe it could only be done at night when it would be a cool night ride with a gondola down the little thing, and you could be picked up at that location 1 or 2 that you want to move it to.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it in the original location, have the night rides down there. Man, I almost had it done. And then it fell through. So I've lived with this building the whole time I was at the city. and it's a beautiful little building. There's, if it's after hours, first of all, the whole construction, people being in danger, I just don't believe. There's ways that you can make it safe for them to work in that building by building a structure or whatever. But, I mean, it happens all the time. People build things on golf courses. And
Well, they built a practice facility.
yeah,
They built a building.
yes,
On
a
the
few
golf
buildings.
course,
It's
yeah.
like 4 buildings over there. So I don't.
They can make it, they can
I
figure it
just
out.
don't believe that. I think that you want to move it into one of the ugliest locations on the golf course. If you've been to that location, it's the city, I don't know, it's used by,
Utility.
I mean, it's horrible. So to move that gem of a building into where you want to put it, I'm not in favor of at all, which I realize is throwing a wrench into this whole situation. Better to move it off the golf course, which is not going to be liked by the state. I don't know how they would feel
It's
about
not an option. It has to be on the Biltmore complex as part of the application.
Honestly, I would leave it where it is. I mean, if they want to have some type of really cool romantic dinners in there, they have electricity, you could have it as something. There are ways to use that building. It would have to be after hours when there aren't golfers there and getting in the way, but it could be lovely.
Keep in mind, there are no bathrooms there. There's no water, I don't believe.
Yeah, there's no facilities and they wouldn't be able to do that. But can I just show you, just because there was a comment made when they received the comment from the State Historic Preservation Office about the location by Kurdite Park saying that it was not appropriate. One of the things that's mentioned in the comment that I had printed out was, our office has consulted with the head of the Florida Historic Golf Trails Program to determine other locations, and the building could be relocated on the canal front that may better meet the needs of the stakeholders while maintaining the historic sections of the golf course and not destroying any of its original route. So they had actually approached this other division completely about, the destruction that could be caused by the construction of the golf course and identified locations, which, again, you're not looking at the ones right in the middle of the canal, I think, and that's kind of why we ended up where we were, because one of the ones is by the school, which is already being used, and then the other 3 that they had proposed were actually by this facilities building at the corner. So it was something that kind of came, looking at those locations that the state had provided, and then this Florida Golf Trails, seemed the most amenable. I do know it's in kind of putting it in the corner, but it is putting it in the corner. There's no other way to look at
I
it.
apologize, I wasn't here the last time you presented to this board.
I did not.
Yeah, no, we didn't end up, because we got these comments, and so we were like, it was
On the agenda, and
it was meant to be on the agenda in April, and we
We
kind
were
of.
going to propose to put it at the Kurdike
Yeah.
Tennis Center, which is still within the overall, but the state said that was not an option.
Keeping it on the complex.
I think the state has stated their sort of preference and opinions. The Public Works Director has stated their preference and opinions. It is now our board's turn to state our preference and opinion. So we can take all the information and then do what it is that we're here to do. Mr. Baños and then Ms. Rolando.
No disrespect to the chair, I was just trying to have a discussion, I apologize, okay? I'm not a good golf player, but there's a set of ladies who like to walk the golf course at 6 in the morning, and I join them, and I do it quite often. So I pass by this building at least twice a week, okay? My concern is the 2 places where you're suggesting to move them, okay? Out of sight, out of mind, okay? And you're gonna spend $1 million to put a building in another place that you're also gonna ignore all over again, and it's gonna deteriorate all over again, especially if all you're trying to do is preserve maybe 10, 15% of it.
We don't know.
Which you don't know, I understand that, okay? It does seem to be, those 2 sides don't necessarily work for me. What the point that I was trying to make to Mr. De Silva is there's significant access without damaging the actual roads or they can wear hard hats. They do have that possibility without having to access it without any issues. I think I'm with Ms. Spain. It should stay exactly where it is. I think it's consistent. There's a whole design to it, and it's a pretty building there. But I do take the chairman's point, which is it's always meant to be a storage facility. So I think it's a little myopic for us to say, well, that's just the only thing that it can be, and this is the only thing it would ever be, just because we haven't come up with an idea of what we can do with it. And certainly that's something for the folks at the commission to determine exactly what they would like to see that envisioned. At least for my vote, I wouldn't want to move to anywhere. I don't buy with respect to you, Hermes, I don't buy the two suggestions as to why it would be a good idea to move it. I understand that the people that are renting the golf course and running the hotel don't want to disturb their procedures there. But I don't want that to be a consideration, especially when, as Ms. Payne pointed out, it is their dereliction of the maintenance of this building that has us here. Okay? So that should not be a consideration, at least as far as I'm concerned. I would like it to stay where it is. I would like it to be as close to where it is as possible, and keep it as a storage facility until we can come up with something else better to do. And, we can install a bathroom in there and put plumbing. It's not difficult to do. Okay.
Thank you,
I mean,
Mr.
there you probably need a pump station.
Thank you, Mr. Banos.
But
Ms. Rolando.
This is an example.
You have to speak right into it.
Okay, this is an example of a self-inflicted wound because this has been sitting out there, we now know, well, for almost 100 years, but it's been neglected for easily 30 years. So we have to figure out, and the city have to figure out a sensible way to deal with this situation. If it had been addressed earlier, we wouldn't be talking about it. So my attitude is it makes no sense at all to take crumbs if we don't know, you're not sure what percentage of the building can be reused. I think from a historic preservation perspective, it should remain where it is. And the portion of it that can be preserved, use those materials, and then add whatever new materials or preserved materials that we are storing. This does not have to stay as a storage facility. We talk regularly about adaptive reuse of historic structures. And I can't imagine anybody in the hospitality business like the Biltmore that can't figure out a way to make money out of this. I think we should add restore the electricity, add water, add bathrooms so that it can be used productively. To replicate it someplace else, to me, where the access still is lousy, makes no sense. Each of us has been at an event where we've been carted to some remote place or not so remote place in a golf cart. So my recommendation, my personal one, not speaking for the board, would be figure out a way to adaptively reuse this structure in a profitable and positive way. And let's do something interesting with it rather than replicate it and forget about it on the edge of the golf course someplace.
Thank you, Ms. Rolando. Anything else from the board?
Chair, I have a public comment.
Actually, I'll have something and then I'll go to public comment. So, Mr. Diaz, I think on your slide, you used the word challenging as one of your first
yes,
items, and I agree.
and expensive.
Definitely challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we did have a conversation about this in a previous meeting. We're having it again now. The reason I asked Ms. Beranas is the original use, it was storage. It can be storage again, right? It can. Now, we would like it to be whatever's best for the building and the users and the owners, but we don't know what that is yet. So I think until such time that we have a better plan, which is not what you're here for, is it should stay where it is. If it's going to move, I think you might get people to get behind it if we had some idea what that was going to be. But to take a beautiful folly, to use Mr. Silva's words, and put it behind a bush doesn't make any sense to anybody. That's a waste of money.
Very well put.
If you're going to use it as a folly, and figure out the use of that folly at one time. But at this particular point, with the information that I think you've brought forward and you can bring forward at this time, it's not enough for at least me to make any sort of recommendations and decisions other than it should stay where it is, it should get fixed the way it was, and should be used at the original use, which is storage, until such time that the city comes with something else. I love everyone's suggestions about plumbing and use and it bringing people there, but I know the challenge of that is insurmountable probably, but that's not what we're being asked today. So until such time that we get a maybe different presentation, you're probably going to get the answer you're going to get.
Understood.
And I would like to, again, appreciate the board understanding our role in this process, right? We're not Public Works, we're not the HPO, we're not the state, we are the Coral Gables Historic Preservation Board. With that, I will open it up to public comments. And if this person wishes to be sworn in, they have to be, no? Oh, this is a discussion
There's no need
item.
for anybody to be sworn in.
Thank you. Please.
Carelia?
Good afternoon. Yes, Carelia. I am president of the Historic Preservation Association, and we have been following this particular item for many years, and we were very pleased about the grant from the state, which really gave a boost to now this conversation. And I agree with Donna, with Peggy, with Javier, with Alex. This building should stay in situ because, first of all, there's not much still standing. And, it really, it's just not even a thought to move it anywhere else. It is a folly. It was part of the original Biltmore complex. It still should stay. I mean, the Biltmore is celebrating its 100th in 2 years. I love Peggy's idea about an adaptive reuse conversation. I am sure Biltmore guests would love to have a destination to the gondola building and pay for it. So I moving it, and I hear I know it's, from Mr. Diaz, all respect to him, but, this is a historic asset. And, moving it, I don't think it should be an option. I think let's keep it where it is. Let's build it as it should be, conserved, preserve it, and use it, find ways to use it. I have a beautiful view shed, which I took when I was there, before it crumbled. And if you sit outside the building, you have a perfect view of the Biltmore Hotel on the water. I mean, it is gorgeous. So to move it anywhere else just doesn't make sense. So, from our organization, we would like you to consider keeping it in situ. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carbonell. Does anybody from the board wish to speak? Does anybody from the board wish to take any action on this item? Would the city find any action from this item helpful? Then there could be a resolution to the city manager, to the board, or we could say, thank you very much.
I think a resolution would be helpful.
What kind of resolution would be
whichever.
helpful?
So a resolution is up to you. My understanding, and perhaps Mr. Diaz can clarify that part of the reason this was coming to you today for discussion is because of steps that we have to take.
Correct. We've directed the designer to get as far as they could without a location, without structural information, without, we got into the point that until we finalize the location, we cannot really continue to proceed with the design. So that's why we wanted to.
Who's the designer?
It's Guri
Guri
Matuti.
Who?
Guri
Matuti.
Matuti.
Marie Matute.
Hermes, a resolution that says, I'm sorry, Mr. Diaz, a resolution that says it is essentially our voice, that it should stay where it is. Would that be helpful?
I mean, that's your direction. I mean, that's your opinion. So we're here to get your opinion. So
Right, they're here to get our opinion. We've stated it, but again, I'm not going to make any resolution. If somebody here wants to make a resolution, we can do so.
So there are a few options, if you don't mind, Mr. Garcia-Ponce. This board can certainly just pass a motion expressing its preference for one location over another. A resolution requesting the city commission to do something, I think at this point would be a little bit maybe ahead of time because we're still at the staff level before we come to a COA. But if this board is interested in making a motion expressing its preference for a certain location, I think that's certainly appropriate and would give a singular voice to the board.
So, Madam City Attorney, so how would you like it? It's not a resolution of the board, but it's
Just
what?
a motion
Just a
of the
motion.
board
It's a
recommending.
motion? Okay, a recommendation? Okay, with the indulgence of the chair, okay? So I'll make a motion for us to incorporate by reference our comments today, and specifically to address the fact that there is our perspective that the gondola building should stay where in its present location, and that it should be preserved to the fullest extent possible. And I'll accept any friendly amendments to augment what I just said.
I would second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Does anybody have any friendly amendments? Ms. Rolando?
I would ask that the city preservation and the lessor or the lessee under the lease explore uses of that building.
Is that acceptable,
So,
Mr. Manos?
Yeah, and maybe add to the motion that there should be a process in which as Ms. Raimundo has suggested, in which we can come up with creative ideas or, to do something with this building.
Is that acceptable, Ms. Spain?
Sure.
Okay, we have a motion and a second with the amendment. Is staff clear on the motion?
I'm happy to reiterate my understanding of the motion if that's helpful to everybody, that it's a motion based on the discussion today, recommending that the gondola building remain in its present location and be preserved to the fullest extent possible, and that in doing that preservation, that the historic preservation officer, city staff, and the current operators of the Biltmore explore uses of the building through some sort of process or collaborative process.
Lovely, exactly what I thought. Okay, so.
Any discussion on that motion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Durana,
Yes.
Ms. Dene,
Yes.
Mr. Silva,
Yes.
Ms. Rolando,
Yes?
Mr. Banos,
Yes.
Ms. Spain,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
and Mr. Garcia-Ponce.
Yes, thank you. The motion passes 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Diaz.
thank you.
Sorry.
Ms. Perenas, any items from the secretary? Any additional items?
That was it for me. We will be working on the scheduling of the orientation as a reminder. And I think that was it from the last meeting also.
I do have, before we go, the question of the orientation. I know that we've been asking for a while, and now we have a full-seated board. We had one of the previous orientations I went to was held on a weekend morning. I think it was a Saturday morning, and I found it to be very beneficial. Does anybody have any thoughts on when would be best to do a meeting so that we can talk to staff? I know it has to be publicly noticed and sunshined and all the like, but is there a time that makes sense to us? And I really enjoyed the one I had with Ms. Spain and Ms. Couts a few years ago.
Was that the Merrick House, wasn't it?
No, it was in the museum
Oh, that's right. That's right.
on a Saturday morning because we were in and out. We only talked about one topic and moved on. It wasn't part of the rest of our day, but I know it is a commitment of our time. So, any general thoughts to direct to help Ms. Perenas with setting up the date?
I like the idea of the Saturday morning because it doesn't interfere with work schedules. And I'd like to request that we do it as soon as possible. Perhaps we could find August.
So I don't have a problem with the 17th of August. Is everybody amenable to that day? Just to put a date out.
You have a problem with, or you?
No, I don't have a.
Oh, got it.
I'm suggesting a date just to move it forward.
I like August 17th. That works on my calendar.
Our meeting is that week. So I think Ms. Pennis is going to check on the availability of the week before or after our meeting or some version of it. But I think we have some sort of a consensus that Saturday morning would be fine for most of us, if that works.
Our meeting's after, the
Yeah,
following
our
week.
meeting is on the 21st, so we'll circulate dates. I'll kind of take a poll of everybody for dates once we get kind of staff confirmed too. And then, but that time frame works.
Okay, perfect. And
Thank
then one last item, I had asked the city attorney to give us a report on what are presentations of appeals by the city attorney's office. And she had, I think I asked her, she had something to report
Right.
on that.
I think Ms. Pennis, we did talk about it at the last meeting. Mr. Banos did bring it up. I don't know if the city attorney has some comments.
Certainly, I have a very few comments to give you all. The appellate procedures, so this board is the only it's non-recommending board in the city, besides the city commission. So you all are one of our only final boards, which means that your decisions are appealed to the city commission. They are not recommendations. Minus the Board of Adjustment, I apologize. They're also a final board. In any case, so what happens is there's an appellate procedure. There is a deadline from once somebody meets with you all. There's, I believe, a 10-day deadline to file a notice of an intent to appeal. We have certain deadlines, and it's supposed to be heard at the next available city commission meeting. Oftentimes that's delayed due to the applicants wanting additional time, staff needed additional time, when the meeting falls based on advertising deadlines, et cetera. So it should be at the next city commission meeting. The city commission hears an appeal based completely on the record below. It is not a de novo hearing. That means they don't take new testimony. They don't hear additional information. It should be a rather short presentation by both the applicant and historic preservation staff about the decision of this board. That we always counsel the city commission that they should be looking for three things. They should make sure that there was due process, meaning the person got notice, they had the ability to appear, they had the ability to question staff, present witnesses, make their own arguments, that there was substantial competent evidence for the decision of this board. So that can be a little bit tricky sometimes if there's a failure to designate, for instance. So you have to make sure that there was substantial competent evidence that it did not need to be designated. So there's sort of a little bit of a nuance there. But the commission is looking to see, was there substantial competent evidence for the decision that you all made, and was the correct law applied? So did you look at the right factors in the Historic Preservation Code? Did you consider those things? Did you consider staff's report? What evidence did you consider, et cetera? So oftentimes those discussions in front of the city commission can go on a little bit more than those three factors. We know that. I wanted to let you all know we issue, or the mayor issues, in consultation with our office, procedural orders every time. They set forth time limits and an order of presentation before the city commission, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, et cetera. We try to keep it very narrow based on the criteria that the city commission should be considering. So they shouldn't step into your shoes. They rely on you. They're looking for those three things. Again, sometimes, as you well know, property owners or applicants are very involved in the process. They have a lot of information that they want to share. So oftentimes the chair or the city commission wants to hear additional information, whether or not that's something that should be considered at that time. Oftentimes it is presented. We always allow public comment at those appellate proceedings, whether or not they're not considered substantial competent evidence or new testimony. It's just public comment. But as always, as you know, the city allows public comment in a lot of different areas where it's not necessarily required, but that's one area where we always allow public comment, though it's not to be considered by the city commission in making their decision. Decisions of the city commission are then appealed to circuit court on a first tier writ of certiorari. It's a petition. That's a process that once that, it's sort of out of your hands and the city commission's hands, and the city attorney's office, along with any outside counsel, represents the position of the city commission and the lower boards, whatever it may be. So we move forward with that and defend the process. So really what you're looking on from beyond the city commission is the process. Was there due process? Was there substantial competent evidence? Was the correct law applied? The same standards that the city commission should look at, that's what the courts look at. So that's generally how the process goes. We have had discussions in the past. We've had discussions with Ms. Pernas about representing not necessarily the historic preservation officer's opinion and decisions, but this board's position, because that's really what's being appealed is the decision of this board. Now, oftentimes what's appealed is a decision to take staff's recommendation for something to appeal or not appeal. And so you are possibly one and the same in your viewpoints about the criteria applying or not. But it could also be the case where Ms. Pernas doesn't think something should be designated and you do, and it's your decision of this board, not necessarily staff's decision that is being appealed. So one thing we're looking at is having me or whoever sits in this chair as your counsel representing the decision of the board before the city commission and laying it out in those ways. This is the due process that was afforded. This is the substantial competent evidence that was considered. This is the law that was applied, and focusing along with Ms. Pernas and any other staff who need to testify about what was considered to sort of narrow the focus of those appeals going forward. It's something we're looking at. It doesn't require any code changes. There's nothing that needs to change, but to sort of focus the presentations on the meat of the matter that the city commission is considering. As you know, people are very passionate about historic preservation, and especially applicants who feel their homes are at issue get very passionate about it and want to speak for a long time, completely understandably. But just to let you all know, we do issue, along with the mayor, those procedural orders. We do try to contain the topics that the city commission considers. We always instruct the city commission that their role in considering that and their final decision making is to uphold your decision, overturn your decision, or remand it back to you for further consideration. As you know, that for the first time in a long time happened recently with the property on Milan Avenue. The remanding, but those are the three options really that the city commission has when they consider an appeal from this board. So that's the procedure. There's of course involved in the details of that lots of deadlines, communications with staff, public notification, mailing. You know, there's a lot of other details involved in those appeals. There's a cost to appeal. There is a transcript that is provided, and that's really the meat, the transcript and the presentations at this board. What is provided. One thing that came up, and I do want to mention to you all, and I think that the chair sort of alluded to this today, is that one thing that the city commission had issue with, in particular that 1221 Milan property, was making sure that this board's decision-making process was clear to the applicant and clear on the record. So making sure, and I think we generally do a very good job, and I think staff's reports especially are very specific, and when you adopt them, you adopt those sort of specific points. But especially in decision making where there's particular points at issue, there may be particular architectural features you're looking at that are very important or not, or dates that are particularly important. That when this board discusses and makes decisions, you incorporate those findings of fact in a very clear manner so that the record is very clear for what reasons you designated that property. I believe and I can see that when you make those motions and incorporate staff's reports, you are incorporating that decision making and those findings. But to the extent that something gets appealed, and if you guys feel very strongly about particular architectural details or particular merits of architects, that you make those very clear in your findings so that the appellant knows exactly what points you made your decision on. It's a little nitpicky, I understand, but I think the commission would appreciate seeing clearly in our motions and findings for what reasons. And so it's because the location of the windows demonstrates that it is an Art Deco, but I don't know what I'm talking about here, but demonstrates the Art Deco qualities of the building, et cetera. And oftentimes that is in the staff report, but I do think it's helpful to sort of flesh out those details in your discussion and your motions, and that seemed to be the direction that the city commission was giving in particular with that property. But I think going forward, it might be a best practice to sort of look at fleshing out our decision-making a little bit more for the possible appellants.
Thank you, Ms. City Attorney.
Should we be incorporating the staff report in when we make a motion to approve or deny?
If that is the reason you want to approve or deny based on the findings in the staff report, yes. And generally the motions that you make incorporate by reference for the reasons mentioned in the staff report or based on the presentations by staff. Yes, okay. They generally do. But for example, there may be a staff report in which staff believes it meets 2 criteria and you all think it meets a 3rd. You want to make those findings and be clear why you think it makes that 3rd finding, or they may suggest 3 and you think it only meets 1, so that you need to designate that. For instance, with the COAs, it's a little bit different, right? It's sort of a blanket appeal or denial with some conditions, which you all flesh out. But again, for those reasons, the more you can explain your discussion, and it's hard to incorporate in a a pithy motion. I understand that. But to sort of flesh out the decision-making for the reasons that the architectural features meet the criteria of this, we find it meets A, B, and C, that's helpful, I think, to the commission when viewing those transcripts and reading through that.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. I think this is something that will be covered in the orientation as well. I really appreciate the explanation. I hope as chairman, when I ask for these things, it is for that specific reason. Is the staff report is great, but we should be specific as to what it is that we want, not what staff has recommended. And as the city attorney said, is we may not agree with the staff report, so we should get in the habit of saying what it is that we agree with, particularly if it is editing out from the 3 things that staff might think. We might think it's a 4th thing altogether, so we don't have to agree with all the things. I do have a question and then maybe a request for something is, do the applicants, when it comes time to an appeal to the city commission, do the applicants have an opportunity to discuss the matter with the commissioners prior to the meeting?
So as with all quasi-judicial matters, we instruct the city commission to avoid ex parte communications. Inadvertent communications, which often come in the form of emails from the public, someone stopping you at Publix, et cetera, can be cured. But for purposeful ex parte communications, we ask to be avoided. Sometimes that results in us speaking with an appellate's attorney and saying, we've recommended that the city commissioners not meet with you ahead of time. Particularly in these matters where the decision should be based on the record below, it's a little complicated to have those ex parte communications if then they're sharing information that is outside of the record that you all considered. So yes, we ask them to avoid those ex parte communications, and we instruct all appellants on our recommendation as well.
So then I have, so one statement and then hopefully an action from the board is, so the city staff, it's not their job to advocate for our position. It is their job to explain to the commission what our position was. So some of us think that we wish that maybe the city staff could advocate for what it is that the board has recommended, but it is not their responsibility to do so. It is their responsibility to do so, to inform and educate the commission as to what it is, what our intention was. Having said that, that doesn't mean that they can't be very good about educating the commission, and hopefully we could talk about something now.
Hey, can you back up? But isn't the staff in a situation like that supposed to, on rebuttal, come back and explain why what the attorney just said is not right?
So
Which you did on the last one, because you read into the record Kara's comment about the date of the stupid card.
But I'll be clear.
And that should have been in our motion, that part.
And 100%. So I think there's a difference between advocate and educate, right? So I don't think they need to advocate for our position, but they do need to educate for our position. And I agree that we could have had a better motion.
Yeah,
and that's why it's important for us to be very clear with our motions. Mr. Baños.
Well, due deference to the chair, it does at that point in time become sort of a legal transaction, a legal argument that is being put in front of the commission, because they're acting in that situation as the arbiter and as a judicial final decision maker. So you do need an advocate for the position of the board to actually be expressed. So if there's an action here that we would like to see is for us to either make the request, the demand, the motion, the vote, however you decide to do it, how much you want to push it, how much you want for us to have the city attorney's office actually represent our position, not the position of the staff who can be the educators, but for the city attorney's office to represent our preferred position over to the commission. I think it's somewhat naive, and it has nothing to do. Jennifer did a wonderful job. But clearly, if you're a member of the city commissioner who has a constituency that they're answerable to, okay, that homeowner is going to go to each one of them and say, "Hey, look what they did. I need this, did not do their stuff." It happens. It's natural, okay. However many times you tell them no, okay, and they're going to, because that's just the nature of the beast. And it's a little difficult for them to sit there in the judicial capacity not having heard that advocacy, okay, because they're human beings. So I think a perspective that truly embodies what the board was trying to achieve, however detailed, because sometimes they just don't have the time to read it, or maybe they're not being presented in a way that needs to be heard orally as opposed to be written. In the sense that, okay, this is what they try to do, this is what the board's mind was, this is why we got to this point in time, and this is this particular member said this from this particular experience, and that's what it was. I think that's very beneficial to the commission. I think ultimately drives the point. I think had that been done, no detriment to Jennifer, I'm just saying, had that been done in that prior hearing, we may have had a different outcome, and the 3.5 hours that you all spent trying to get that resolved would not have been for naught, okay? So I think that there should be some action from the board, making the request to the city attorney's office that it is our preference, our wish, our motion, however forceful you want to be, that they be the representatives of the voice of the board in front of those appeals.
The city attorney, I'm sorry, are you saying the city attorney should be our representative
Yes.
instead of staff?
No, in addition to staff. In other
But
words,
is that not already the case?
no.
So traditionally, the city attorney's office does not stand up and go over the findings of the Historic Preservation Board. City staff has presented the findings below based on that expertise of the Historic Preservation Officer. We can, of course, as whoever sits here with you all as the board can present the process of what happened. I think to go over the due process considerations, the substantial competent evidence considerations, but staff would always be present, and I think is needed to be present to answer any questions or clarify any findings or answer any rebuttals from a property owner. Our office has traditionally not, like I said, stood up and presented the board's findings in the same way that I believe Mr. Banos is considering, but whatever would be done certainly in conjunction with staff.
Yeah. So the way I've seen this done, so you understand, I used to serve 12 years ago at the City of Miami Civil Service Board. And the civil service is a situation in which you have an employee who has lost some type of benefit, et cetera, okay? And you have a representative of the city attorney's office for the city of Miami giving the city's perspective in that situation. The board decides, and ultimately, if that's ever appealed, there will be a city attorney who actually presents the board's perspective. So that is the way I envision this happening, because I think that ultimately is beneficial for the protection of historic preservation system. But it doesn't have to be that way. I'm just making a suggestion for the constitution of the board.
Is there an additional staff person?
Yes, not other. I'm sorry. No, it's the same person. That's Jennifer will be
The attorney.
Yeah, it will be the same person who ultimately go there. Now they do have.
Talking about the civil service
So
board that you were-
they do have a litigation section in the city of Miami that handles a lot of this stuff. So they just use the chairman can speak very fluently about this. I'm giving you a sort of an example in which is done a parallel.
In that situation, the attorney is the staff.
It depends. You can usually have a staff member from the department and the attorney's office who both present,
Right,
but
they
it
both
is
present.
also on the staff member. I have something for staff. Ms. Rolando, do you have anything to say, Ms. Pennes, before I get it to Ms. Rolando?
I was just going to state, because I think some of the things that Mr. Banos brought up could be handled during briefings between commissioners and then staff, meaning myself and Stephanie, in advance of the meetings. Because the day of the meetings, yes, and that's something that we had talked about, that the day of the meetings, it should just be, this is what happened. This was the presentation of the meeting. We're not supposed to be bringing in any new evidence. And then having a separate person that didn't even present before you all
But the
talk
same
on
way
that day might
The same way
be
the city
problematic.
manager meets with the individual
Right.
commissioners prior to that commission meeting, you should be meeting with them also.
So maybe that's a motion, but Ms. Rolando.
What I think, if the applicant has received an adverse ruling from this board and appeals it to the city commission, the applicant is there and is going to be either have an advocate or a lawyer, or they're advocating for themselves. The city, someone should be representing and advocating for the board's position. Now, the tricky part is the city attorney is advising the commission. And so you're putting them in a little bit of a conflict. But I do think it's important for our position to be advocated for. And frankly, it doesn't happen that much. So I don't think,
And I think a lot of the conflict that we're discussing about is it's an action of the board that is against a staff recommendation. So that's the other part too, is that
Well, that
typically, if there's an
doesn't even
appeal of a
happen that
decision that
much.
staff maybe was, in favor of or not, or,
That has happened to me
yeah, no, it happens. I know it happens.
times. And I.
We've had it happen here.
Abandoned my position because I'm there representing the board's position. That's, the board's the final
you were
authority,
him.
not staff.
There,
Yeah, we are your rep.
I think there are many requests or positions or motions that we can make. I think there's a very simple one that we can start with, which is, and again, I'm not making this motion, I'm offering it as a potential motion from somebody, is to make a motion to the city manager's office or to the commission to direct the city manager to have the Historic Preservation Office meet with the commission prior to any item that's up for appeal before them so that they can really take time to understand the item before them. Because I think it's, as we know, we spend 3 hours on it. There's no way they can. And I think not to advocate, again, I understand there's a difference in educate, but even just to educate as to what the position is, to clarify it, because sometimes it is unclear. And when you have an applicant advocating for their position, it's a little bit, it carries a lot of weight. So I don't know if anybody's interested in starting with a small step, but I think that might be something that may help the city staff in their ability to work with the commission on items. Madam City Attorney.
Mr. Chair, just I wanted to address two things. One, Mr. Rolando, sometimes our office does have different individuals representing perhaps staff or a board, and then the city attorney herself sits with the city commission. So we can sort of, separate ourselves into two different roles. That often happens in some cases. One of us will need to sit with the board, someone will need to represent staff. So that has happened before. So we feel comfortable doing that from our office's perspective. If I may suggest, I'm happy to go back to our city attorney team and look at how other cities deal with this and how other municipalities deal with appellate proceedings and who represents a board, who represents staff. I think it may be a helpful exercise for us to do a little bit of investigation about best practices and other ways to handle this and discuss internally. I'm certainly happy to have any motion you all want to make, but before we commit to something, I think it would be helpful for us to continue exploring and finding, as we go forward, establishing my office's relationship with Ms. Pernas and the board and presenting to the city commission and see what else is out there as other options.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam City Attorney. I still understand, having done some of this, that there is no harm in a proper briefing to commission members by a subject matter expert.
So I think that I take the chairman's point well. I'll make the motion according to what he said, because I think that's a very good first step. However, I would like to have an item in the discussion item in the next meeting, or if you need September, okay, for you to bring that report to us, okay? Because I think it is a legal argument that has been made ultimately in front of the commission, and if you don't have your lawyer on your own side, it ain't happening, okay? So that's just being plain, okay, in my perspective, which is not taking anything away from staff's perspective. Staff does a great job, but there's a different skill set. You're talking not educational, you're talking persuasively, and there's different ways to present stuff. So I'll make the motion and I'll request for that item to be put in the next agenda.
So the motion would be to recommend, would the city manager or the city commission be the appropriate person to?
The city manager.
City manager to have the Historic Preservation Office meet with the commissioners to brief them prior to any appeal coming before them. Is that correct, Mr. Baños? Okay, is there a second?
And just to clarify, along with bringing back something in one of the upcoming commission meetings.
Of course, I like to separate them, but they go together. Mr. Maxwell is second. Mr. Silva, did you?
I had a question.
So we have a motion and a second, Mr. Silva.
Sir, I think it's a wonderful idea. I just, something something that you said about the applicant not being allowed to have an ex parte
Yes.
communication with each commissioner. How is that allowed? from
Briefing,
staff?
it's a staff briefing.
So yes, there is a little bit of a nuance to the, just we call it the Jennings rule about a staff meeting for technical expertise to give sort of straightforward information and not advocate. It's just information about this is what happened, this was the decision of the board. But we will work closely with Ms. Pernas to make sure that there's no violations of any ex parte rules in those briefings.
Yeah, staff briefs the commissioners at every meeting.
Can we talk about a friendly amendment to that?
Of course.
Wouldn't it be for staff to meet with the individual commissioners anytime there is a historic preservation item on the board? Why is it just for an appeal?
So my thought is I like to start
Baby steps?
where things are the most important. Of course, I would love that to happen.
We don't have very many items.
But
Yeah, the other resolutions to the commission would typically be presented by a member of the board. So depending if there's a preservation item that's like a city project or something, then yes. But then if there's any other resolution that's to the commission, one of you all should be presenting that to them in that way.
and this is
Kind of like
Mr.
the lights.
This is Mr. Baños's, right? There's a hierarchy of items. In my
appeal's the most
opinion,
important.
the appeal is the most important, and I would like to start with that one.
I mean, Ms. Payne, I'll make the motion for a second motion.
I would-
But I think, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm off your, but I think I'm trying to hone on the conversation to the appeals process, because I think there's a little something missing to it, and whether it is the chairman's idea or my idea or anybody's idea, I would like to see it done so that we can actually preserve these properties, and I think that's the ultimate goal.
My concern is that we have a city manager that does not want the preservation officer to meet with the individual commissioners. And if that ever is the case, it's not the case now, I'm not saying that it is a case, but if that ever is the case, then that can be avoided if in fact there's this resolution by the board.
So
Just saying,
we have,
that it could possibly happen.
we have a motion and a second. If we'd like to do an additional motion or resolution, we may.
Fine, I withdraw my friendly amendment.
Mr. Baños, still okay with your,
I mean, I'll make the motion for what she's suggesting, just because I agree with her as a second
your
motion. But let's just stay with the one motion we have in front of us. Let's vote on that one, let's move on to the next one.
Madam City Attorney, could you repeat the
So
motion?
just to clarify, it's a motion requesting that the city manager direct the historic preservation officer to meet with city commission staff prior to any appeals before the city commission and brief them on the details of that
Thank
process.
you. Have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Mr. Durana,
Yes.
Ms. Dene,
Yes.
Mr. Silver,
Yes.
Ms. Rolando,
Yes.
Ms. Payne,
Yes.
Mr. Banos,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
and Mr. Garcia Ponce.
Yes, motion passes 8-0. Ms. Spain, is there an additional motion today? Okay. Anything else from the board for today?
I mean, that one should be a resolution, it should not come from me for other reasons, but okay, but if it's a resolution that is something they're gonna vote on, it probably should a good idea to actually come in as something the commission has to vote on. And so that should come from another member of the board and make that resolution.
Madam City Attorney, did you say you're coming back at the next meeting or the meeting after with your analysis?
By September, we'll just say by September, we'll certainly come and give you a briefing on, we'll do a little bit of a survey about other cities and let you know what we found and what options we have.
Great, can we do it then, perhaps?
Yeah,
Okay.
so who prepares the agenda, just out of curiosity?
This agenda
staff
for this
does.
meeting?
City staff.
Our staff does.
Was that just because I had asked for that item, discussion item to be on the agenda?
Yeah.
And it wasn't, so just.
We'll make sure to
just-
include it next
It
time.
is there, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Is there any old business or new business to be addressed? Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Meeting is adjourned.